Who here has ever been in a conversation where you have a conversation with someone and you just feel exhausted? I remember having this conversation with a coworker of mine, and it was after a weekend and some stuff happened with their in-laws, and it's the beginning of the workday, and they're like, "Oh, Amy," and they just go off, and it's about 15 minutes, and they're just going and going and going, and they don't ask me one question. They don't even stop for a breath. And then at the end of the conversation, she's like, "Oh, Amy, thank you so much for listening. Like, I feel so much better." And I was just like, holy, what just happened? I'm exhausted. I don't even think I can go through my day now. What just happened? So what happened was that coworker of mine dominated the conversation. And when she was sharing and divulging all these details and personal information, what was happening in her brain was she was getting a rush of dopamine and oxytocin and all these feel-good chemicals. Meanwhile, I wasn't getting any of that. And that is why after two people had a completely different experience of that conversation. She left that conversation thinking, "Oh my God, great. I love Amy. I can't wait to talk to her again." And I left, "Oh my gosh, I need to avoid this person like the plague. It's awful. I feel terrible when I'm around them." This is what happens in conversations. And so it's important that you're aware of this. And I think it's important that you understand the psychology of why it's important to be aware of balance, because people who talk a lot and are used to dominating the conversation, they do not know that they do this. This is usually not because they're evil or they have bad intentions. It's because they're not aware, and chances are people never told them. And so if you do this, you might not be aware that you're doing this. But if you find that people don't pick up your calls, it's you that is the one who's trying to like get meetings with people or have like you're the one who's always trying to push for someone to make time for you, this might be an indication that there's not enough balance in your conversation. And if you're on the other side where people are always clamoring for your time, they're always trying to meet up with you, well, this is probably an indication that you're a really great listener and they feel great. But if you're feeling exhausted and depleted, again, this is where the boundaries and the limits conversation starts to come in. And you might need to tell Aunt Mary or coworker Michael that, "Hey, I know that after the weekend you have a lot of stuff going on and you want to share, and I'm so flattered that you want to share all these juicy details with me. I am just, in my mornings, I really value my alone time because it really sets me up for the week. If you can just kind of save our conversation and maybe we can have a walk and talk, that would be great," right? Set your boundaries and your limits versus just listening to the coworker for 15 minutes like I did and feel exhausted and then resent them afterwards. Again, like I mentioned earlier, unspoken expectations are premeditated resentments. If you find that you are feeling resentment, this is an indication a conversation needs to be had, a boundary needs to be drawn, a need or desire needs to be expressed. So again, the person who is doing self-disclosure, when they're sharing information about them, they get a burst of activity. They get those feel-good chemicals in their brain. And the reason why it's important for you to know this is when you're having conversations, one of the keys to emotional connection is that you take it beyond the superficial level. If you're just talking about the weather, if you're just talking about what you watched on television, that's fine to warm up the conversation. Small talk exists for a purpose. You might go, "I hate small talk. I don't do it." I used to say the same thing. But actually in the psychology of conversations, there's a reason why we start with small talk and we talk about the weather. It's the very first step that starts the conversation. It primes the conversation. You don't want to be talking about trauma with the very first step. So the very first step, small talk. Talk about something that you have in common, whether it's the weather, whether it's, the television, whether it's a new water cooler, whatever it is. You have that conversation. It's something you have in common, builds this baseline of connection on a superficial level. Then you take it to the next level. The next level is where you have a conversation that goes a little bit deeper. And you want to start asking questions that will enable someone to share. When you want to create communication mastery, you need to put the onus on yourself that you are the leader in conversation. You can't just go into a conversation, expect them to be the one that's going to build rapport and create this emotional bond. That's not mastery. That's not you being a leader. So always know that you are the leader in conversation and you can direct and guide the conversation. So if you find that, all right, we're talking about the pandemic way too much, shift it, right? So you want to ask a question. It maybe you're at a conference. What was your favorite part of that talk? What resonated with you? Oh, interesting. Another conversation starter. So what are you most excited about these days? It's a great question to ask instead of like, so what do you do? Right? So with the second part of this, which is asking a question that will enable them to reveal a little bit more, you notice that these conversation starters, they're not going in too deep, but it goes in levels. So very first level, a commonality where you can just create this base level connection. It's superficial. Second is a question that takes it out of the superficial zone and enables a little bit of sharing. Now, if you want to go deeper, the third question can go a little bit deeper, right? So maybe they talked about they're most excited about these days. Oh, they just launched this side project and it is this art program for children. And then you might want to ask a little bit deeper and be like, so what really was the reason, like what caused you to want to start this program? Like, were you really into arts when you were a child? Then it could be another question. Oh, like, did one of your parents show you, like, was artistry like really encouraged in your household? Then they can start talking and revealing a little bit more. And that is how emotional bonds start to get built. It is this back and forth of asking questions that go a little bit beyond the superficial, but it goes in levels. You don't want to go straight to level 3 because it's very jarring for someone. And again, you want to also be aware of the timing of conversations, right? You don't want to launch into this bonding emotional connection conversation again at 8:30 in the morning on a Monday before there's an important board meeting. Bad timing. Again, like using boxing gloves versus handshake. All of this matters. It's becoming a master in communication is being aware of all these moving parts. And again, part of this is you practicing. You're not going to be perfect at it from the beginning, but you practice and you start to pay attention. How is this person responding to me? If this person is responding well to the questions you're asking, they're smiling, you notice that they start mirroring your body language, then you know, like, positive feedback loop. Oh, this is working. Okay,